Hello, welcome to this demo video. We're going to be looking in this quick video today a way to extract tables or table data from PDF files using a Python module called Camelot. So we're going to give it a try and see if we can get it working. So when I say PDF tables, I mean something like this, where it's like a PDF file. So a traditional kind of PDF ready for printing, but it has obviously tabular data in it, right? And so this is pretty useless to use in terms of any sort of programmatic access, right? Because this is just a PDF, and PDF files are kind of they're not just like textual files. They're actually kind of a binary file that has all the information for this text, and it's very kind of complicated how it's put together and places all these elements within the document. So this is pretty common problem that kind of crops up for various organizations that release kind of data and reports, mostly like government organizations and stuff like that. So this one example we're doing today is recycled material information for a U.S. state. So what we're going to do is try to pull this data out, and this is such a common problem that there's been people developing tools to do this, like this Camelot tool, and this is their homepage, and it has just kind of like some getting started quick guides on how to do it. So we're really pretty much going to follow this guide and see if we can get some data to extract out of this PDF file. So first thing we're going to do is try to get everything installed that we're going to need. So I'm going to try to install this Python module by doing our pip3 install and the name of the module. And so this might need to install various things, or we'll see how much kind of other dependencies it has to build on top of it. Um, so what we're also going to try to do is download some data. So while this is running, we can take a look at this report here. And I just happened to kind of drop the file name from this path on this website. You can see that the state has a bunch of, let's see if we can figure out. It has a bunch of reports here, and if we're interested, say, in the recycling report from, we're looking at the 2016 file, but we could also see that there's 2015, 14, 13, 12, and 11, right? So maybe we can, and a 2017 and an 18. So there's a lot of data here. Let's see if they all kind of look the same. Or at least so there's all kind of like, at least kind of, yeah, kind of looks very similar. So it looks like the construction of these tables are per page. There's a different table saying different things. So let's see if we can figure out how to do this in this module to extract it. So let's see how this is going, installation. All right, so we got some warnings, just because of the version I'm using. Um, oh, and we also have this dependency that was not met is incompatible, but we'll see if, we got a success message anyway. So we'll see if we run into any issues with it. If we do, we might have to come back and figure out what's going on with this dependency issue, but hopefully it works. Um, so if you got a message saying like this completely failed, if you didn't get the successful message, then you'd have to figure out what's wrong with it. But we kind of got some warning, so hopefully it should be fine. All right, so let's go to our downloads. And I'm going to make a directory called PDF extract. And so I'm going to make a new script here. I'm just going to call it, going to edit it called extract .py. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be a little fancy here. We're going to use Sublime, or we're going to use the request modules to download these data files for us. So you can imagine if you had maybe like a lot of PDF files that you wanted to process, You might want to have some more of an automated way because, of course, we could go in here and open each one and save as, but we can maybe do this a little bit more automated. And if we had a bunch more, if we had like 100 of them, that would make a lot more sense. But we can give it a try to see if we can get that working. So what we're going to do is we're going to import the request module and use that to download these files. So I'm going to make this font a little bit bigger. Okay, so what we're going to do is import the request modules because we're going to download these files. And let's say we do have a number of these files here. So if we look at the URLs for these, they're pretty much the same until they get to 17 and 18. So we could copy this link address and we could just paste this here. It's a pretty long URL. Um, we could see that the end really only changes. The only thing that changes is the year. So we could maybe make a simple for loop in here and say we want to do 2011, 12, 13, etc. And so we'll just loop through each one of these years and make a new URL for each one. And we'll turn this into a template string by adding an F in the front of it, and then we can drop in, oops, we can drop in our URL year that we're changing here. So every year, it would be a little bit different. For every loop, it just changes the URL. So we just make sure this works. Let's just print the URL out and run this. All right. So we can loop through the URLs we can build. So now we just need to download this file using the request module. Like I said, you could do this manually, but we're just kind of, using our Python skills here to just do this automated. Because you can imagine if there's was, a lot more, you could actually even do this a little bit fancier. You could say range and say, okay, I want you to start at 2011 and then go until 2015, or sorry, 2016. But it needs to go one further because it's not inclusive. Um, so we'd say 2017. And so then that should do actually the same thing. All right. So, this is pretty irrelevant, but, you can imagine if you had a lot of years from like, the 80s or something, you could do that and do a whole range of them at once if the URL was the same. But to download a file in requests, we simply need to open it, but we can kind of treat it like a file. So we can say with with requests.get, and we give it the URL, and then we just pass this parameters to tell it to stream. And so that just means it's going to stream the data, the binary data, as it comes in. So it's just not like it has to make the entire request and then wait. So this is good if the file is really large. These aren't very big files, I'm assuming. But if it was, you could do this approach to make sure you don't have to load the entire file into memory before you do something with it. So then we have it, we're opening the URL as a stream, and then we need to open where it's going to go. And so we'll call it, we'll just make a file name called the year.pdf. And then we need to open that as a write mode and then binary mode, because PDFs are binary. And then as something like this. And then the last thing we need to do is copy the file from the request stream to this open file. And so we can use a built-in module called sh utilities util. And so this is a built-in thing, built in with Python 3 that has a number of kind of things that interact with the operating system, file system, stuff like that. And it has one called file copy or copy file object. And you just simply pass it the requests that we've opened here, the kind of the raw data coming in, and where you want to put it, which is this new file that we just opened called year PDF. So if we ran that, uh, we should see, let's print the URL just so we know which one we're on. We should see it going out and grabbing each one. So again, this is really just preliminary stuff. We don't need to do this to do it on a one-off file, but we're just kind of thinking in the mode if we had a whole bunch of these files, we want to do this step to it. So as this, this will go through and download all of them and save them to the same directory that it's in. Um, so that might be fine, but you might want to put it somewhere else. So like let's make a data directory, and we'll remove the PDFs in this directory. And then we'll just make sure to say to put it in the data directory next time we run it. All right, so what we're going to do is try to follow the tutorial for this Camelot module to see if we can figure out to get some text out of it. So I'm just going to do this once because I don't want to keep looping. So I'm going to put this temporary break down here so it downloads the file and then breaks. So we have import Camelot, so we're going to do that. Then we have, we tell what file to read. So we'll tell it to read the file that we just saved, which will be this file name. And so we can pull this out of here and just put it somewhere else. We could say like file name and make it that, and then put this back in where we took it out, and then use that again here. So if we decide later to change it again, we just change it in one place. All right, so then it reads the table, and it looks like you can simply say export. So this is like the very kind of like quick start guide, right? So there's probably a lot more to it than this, but we just want to give it a shot and see if it works or what we get out of it. So we'll say tables.export, and I'm not sure what this compress does. I don't know if we need that, but we'll leave that off for now just in case we don't. And so we want to change the file that it's reading, which is going to be our file name that we're reusing here. And then we want to export it out as CSV. Oh, sorry, we don't want to overwrite our file name that we're gonna. That's the file name coming in, right? That's the PDF. We don't want to output it there. We want to output it to a new file name in the data directory, maybe. And we'll call this one the year.csv, right? All right, so let's see if this works. It should download the file, open it up, and then try to do the export method that's built into this Camelot module to export it as a CSV format to this file name. So let's run this and see what it says. All right, so it says Camelot has no attribute read PDF. So let's see what we're doing wrong here. All right, so looking at the instructions, I don't really see anything obviously wrong, like nothing, I didn't name a variable wrong or something like that. So my next step would be to Google this, right? Because I don't know what this error message means or why we're getting it. So let's just search this and see if anyone else has had this problem. It looks like right off the bat there is a Stack Overflow for the same error message. So let's take a look. It says here's a link with the full installation steps. So I thought I was following the installation steps, but it looks like since all Camelot, you need to say Camelot PY base. Okay. So they say after you install Camelot, slash p hyphen py cv write this instead. Okay, so let's try that. So I don't know what, I assumed I installed the right camel app, but maybe I did not. So let's uninstall what I installed, just so it's removed. And let's follow this instruction instead. Okay, so that worked. So I'm assuming I installed the wrong camel app, which is interesting. All right, and so now they say this is how you import it. So let's go back to our script and change this out for how they say you should import it. And so now Camelot should be the correct module that's being pulled in and ran. So let's see if we run this and get a different result now. All right, so it's taking a very long time to load, I'm assuming. Might have to initialize a lot of stuff, I'm not sure, or maybe it's just on the first run it takes a long time. No idea. So we're gonna see what it's gonna, if it's gonna do anything. All right, so it loaded and then it ran the file to download. Then we got an error here. Ghost script not installed. You should install it using the instructions here. Okay. So there's obviously some dependency that we don't have installed here. And so this depends on what kind of system you're running this on. So they're giving us instructions for if you have Ubuntu, which is a Linux machine, or if you have a Mac OS, which I'm actually running this on, which has a tool called Homebrew. So this, unfortunately, if you'd have to be running on, uh, if you'd have to install this tool if you're running on Mac, if you wanted to install it on Mac, and then you'd run this command to install Ghost script. So they don't really have an example here for doing this on Windows. So you could just kind of Google that really quick. So it looks like there is some way of doing this if you install it on Windows. So I would give that a shot if you're on a Windows machine to see if you can get GhostScript installed as well. Alright, so I'm going to follow the directions for my operating system that I'm doing this example on here is Mac. So I'm going to run these commands. I do have the Homebrew tool installed, so it's going to run it. I don't need to install that tool because it's already there, but we're going to run the command to install GhostScript and the TCL TK. So we'll pause this and come back when it's done. Alright, so this ran for a while, installed a lot of dependencies and a lot of libraries. Um, so I do have some warnings here saying you might need to do some additional configuration for it to get to work. This page gave us some, oh, there's a section here on Windows, so you can go follow this directions here to install it for Windows. But for Ghost script, it says we can check it to see if it works by running these commands. And so if we go into our Python interpreter here and try to import these commands and run them, see if it says the right output there. So it did output something. I don't know if that it needs to exactly say that, but it did output something. It says the output of the find library function should not be empty. All right, so it wasn't empty, so it means it found the library. So it looks like it's installed correctly. So after all that, lots of system configuration stuff, let's try running this again and see if we get a different result this time. All right, so it's downloading the PDF file and it's doing the extract operations on it, and it finished, and we didn't get any messages. So no error messages is good, right? But let's see if we open the data directory. Let's see what's in there. And so we have um, the file that we downloaded, this 2011 PDF, and then we have table 1 and table 2. So if we open these up, let's see if we open these up in just like a native kind of tabular data viewer. Here, let's see what it looks like. So we just want to match up what was in the PDF to see if we got the same kind of tables in the results, our output. So this is the table 1, it says. And so let's compare that to what we got out of the PDF here. So this is so there's some mistakes here, right? Like so the it didn't pick up the headers, right? Because it says Adams, which is one of the counties, is the header for the table. But we can see that that's not true, right? Like there are headers, but it didn't pick that up. But it did pick up the numbers, it looks like, right? So Allegheny, looks like all the numbers are there. And then if we go down to the bottom, material tonnage based on raw, retract, that's there. So that worked. So that's what this said table 1 was. So let's look at the next set of files, or the next table, which says table 2. Let's open this again with this numbers. And then this was what was in the CSV output. Um, so this looks pretty bad. So it looks like it tried to mush maybe some fields together. So we have county, so we have Adams. Yes, it's difficult to kind of like see which one, what table this is actually coming from. So this is actually like, 3 different tables, right? Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tables. So in this setup, like each page is its own table. So I wonder if this thing got confused and thought like this was one big table that spanned multiple pages. I don't know. Um, or if it didn't even try to. So this last one is material tonnage totals based on raw data, 5,000. So that's not this one. That's not this one. Or this one. Yeah, so I'm not sure where this data is coming from. You could always like, we can probably try to do a find in here. Oops. Let's open that again. So we could maybe, open this PDF and look for that value specifically and see if we can find it. Found on one page, page 1 here. So this was just the first page again. So I'm not really sure, what it's pulling from. Let's look for one of these other values here. That's also on the first page. So it didn't really work right for the whole thing. So let's look at the documentation and see if we can get any sense of if there's ways we can kind of customize this to do something better. Um, all right, so it looks like there's a lot of options here. Let's take a look. All right, so reading the documentation, you can tweak things a little bit, right? To try to make it better at detecting tables. But why I'm curious is if its ability to distinguish tables within, the entire document. So what I'm going to do as a test is try to just pull out page 4 or the last page, page 5, and see if I can just save that as a PDF and tell it to load that one and see if it pulls out the data correctly just for that one. So I'm going to export this, just a single page out as another PDF, and then we'll see, I'll try to load that one into the tool. So I'm going to put this in here and call it test.pdf. And so now if I look at that, um, if I look at that file, I should be able to see, here's just the test one. It looks like this. That didn't work. It's still all there. So let me go through and delete these additional PDFs pages here. Okay, let's try this. All right, so I just refreshed. It actually did delete them and it did remove the pages, but it didn't refresh the interface. So I just closed it and opened it again, and it's just this one page now. So I'm going to save this out to our test file again. And so let's take a look at what it looks like. Here's the test PDF, and it's just that one table. All right, so now I'm going to feed this test PDF into our script. We're not going to download anything here, so I'm going to comment out all this stuff. And I'm just going to load the test PDF and see if we can export the tables again. Let's call it tests in the same directory. So I'm just trying to gauge to see if it can read those tables and it's just getting confused that there's like a bunch of tables in the one document, or if that's the possible problem. So if we were able to take it one page at a time, would that work? So let's see what it came back with. So here's the output, and it looks like it worked, right? So that's the that's the table. This is the original attempt. So this is the new version of it. And so it did look like it was able to pull out the right data. The headers are messed up again, right? But as long as it's consistent in how it messes up, then that's totally fine, right? We can kind of program around that. And then this is the PDF itself. So we can see that like it did correctly pull out, the numbers and everything, and it's all there. So what we need to do now is, I guess, figure out a way that we could potentially pull out, split up the page or the individual PDF so that it's individual pages, and then process each individual page separately so that it knows, it's not getting confused about which table is what. So we need to figure out we can do that programmatically, because of course we don't want to do that manually for each one of these. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to search Python split PDF into pages, And then this one has an answer. And so they say this package pypdf2 has that ability, and they give you some example code here. So let's see if we can do this. Let's install this. And in the example code they have here, they say they open up the PDF file, they find out how many number of pages there are, they make a new writer, they add each page individually, the page that it's currently on in this for loop, and then it outputs it out here. It makes a file name and then writes it out. So it looks pretty straightforward in terms of what the code's doing. So let's see if we can get this installed and it works. So that was installed. So let's go back to our script here. And so this is getting kind of messy, but we'll fix it later. So we already have this file name downloaded called 2011, right? That's already in the data directory. There it is, PDF 2011. So let's import the modules that they say we need to import. And they say we also need to import the OS module, which is built in, so we don't need to install that. Let's just see if we can get the PDF reader to read that file and see how many pages there are. So I'm just going to copy this and hard code the 2011 in there and try to do this here. So they open the file like this, PDF reader, and then they have this method built in that tells you how many pages there are. So let's see if we can do that. Let's print that value out. So we're testing to see if we can actually do this, like use this module like nothing breaks, and then if it can tell us how big this PDF is, then we can do all the rest of the operations probably. So let's try running this again and see what we get. Path is not defined. Okay, so I need to give it the file name, not the path. The path was from the example code that I forgot to replace. All right, so it says there's one page. Let's see if that's true. I was messing around with these a lot, right? So let's see if it's actually one page. Yeah, this is one page. All right, so we need new data. So I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna go in here, comment this out. I'm gonna uncomment this. I'm gonna comment this out. So we're just gonna download the PDF again. So we have real data. All right, so now I've downloaded the file there. And if we look in here, it's 5 pages. So let's go back to our script and we'll comment this all out again. And then uncomment this. And so now we should see, hopefully it says there's 5 pages. All right, so that worked. So now we know that there's 5 pages and it can read this, and so we could potentially write with it too. All right, so now we need to do the second part where we can pretty much just copy their code here, right? And we can modify a little bit to do what we wanted to do. So we just want to test to make sure we can do this first part here. So open that hard-coded file name 2011, and what we're going to do is we don't need to do that anymore. So it's going to get the number of pages and it's going to loop this number of times. This is what this range function is doing. So it's going to loop 5 times. It's going to, for each loop, it's going to make a writer, a PDF writer, and then it's going to add the current page into it. And then this is kind of like a way of formatting variables into strings. This was before template strings were really kind of introduced or became popular, or this is just the preferred way that this person who wrote this code example likes to do it. Let's use template strings here. And so let's we'll hard code this stuff for now, but we'll change it later. And so we'll say 2011, and then we'll say the page that we're on. So let's see what they had. Page. Okay. So we'll say page .pdf. So that will be the file name, and we'll put it in the data directory again. And then it opens up that for write, and then writes it out, and then it prints some information, which we don't care about. We'll print the file name though, so we know where it's at. So this is kind of like a test again to see if we can split those files out into separate files. All right, so that took a long time to start, but it eventually did, and it looked like no errors. So let's look at the data directory. We can see there's 2001, 2011, I'm sorry, and here's each file is its own. There's the full one. So it output them out into, zero, because, zero is everything is index base zero. So zero is the first one, and then it went to five or four to write them out. So what we can do now is we know we have the ability to do this. We can generate an individual page from a bigger PDF, and now we can incorporate that into our code here. So let's uncomment this. So we're going to loop for the years again. We're going to download the file, and that's the file name for the file that we're downloading. Once it's downloaded, though, we're going to integrate this piece here, where we're actually splitting out the PDF into its pieces. And so we're going to change the file name. So that's the file name coming in. That's going to be there. And then we need to change, this is hard-coded, so we need to change this back to a variable. So it'll be year underscore page. And let's just keep track of how many pages there are so we know later how many times the loop. So this, we'll just leave this here actually. We'll do that in a second. And so once this happens, this will write this out 5 times. And then once it gets here, once it's here, then the individual page exists, right? So it wrote it out. And so now what we can do is bring in our Camelot stuff we were doing before, right? Uncomment that. And so now we're going to ask it to read not the big file name, but the individual one we just made, the output file name. And so then it's going to parse it, pull out the number of tables, and then let's change this to a new directory called CSVs. And we'll make that directory to CSV. And so then it will output the CSVs to this new directory. But again, we want it to make sure it includes the year and the page. Or yeah, so the page will be equivalent to the table number. All right, so let's review this. Let's comment this. So loop. Well, let's run this and see if we get an error message first, and then we'll come back and comment it so we can review it. All right, so let's run it. Okay, so this sometimes happens when you copy and paste code around and you use other people's code and you paste it. But if you copy here, so my editor by default here was using tabs as indentation, and then the code we copied and pasted in here using spaces. You can see the spaces here, these single dots. So there's automated ways of doing this. You can just come down here and say turn indentation to tabs. If you have that in your editor, if you don't have that in your editor, you can just unindent everything and then re-indent it. And you have to make sure everything is correctly tabbed over. So that would get rid of that error. So download of the file, it's processing the file for each one. It's interesting. So this one is printing the number of tables it's finding here. So there's still 2 files or two tables for each one, which is interesting. But we'll take a look to see what it's actually in the CSV directory once it's done here. Oh, and it's doing the next one. So let's stop it. I forgot to put a break back in. So let's look what it got up to here in the CSV directory. All right, so we have page one. So the first part is the first part of the file name is what put in there, the year and then the page. And then this one says page one, page one, table two. So this thing is saying that there's two tables here. This looks like one of the tables, and this is something else. I'm not sure what this is. Adams 230.8. Let's see if that's in this one. Adams 230.8. Yeah, so this tool is for some reason outputting, the data twice like this. Um, we actually know that there's one table per page, like it's hard coded, right? The PDF only has one table because that's the whole reason we're splitting it out. So what you can do is tell it to only use the first table that it finds by saying the zero index. So even if it does seem to think that there's multiple tables there, we know it's really only one, and then it will only export that one. So that could probably cut down on some of the extra noise that's being outputted here as it's working. So this will run in a second, and we'll take a look at the output. All right, so I tried that, and it says table object has no attribute export. So looks like I was wrong about that. I thought you could do that from this example here, where they say tables bracket 0, and they do that here. Um, so I guess we were using the export here, so maybe it doesn't have export, but it has to CSV. So I guess we'll do that. We'll say to CSV and see if that works instead of the export. Maybe export is reserved for all the tables and just to CSV has it for individual tables. So let's see if this works. All right, so it's running. This is where we got the error message before. Seemed to work. So while it's doing the rest of them, let's take a look at the directory and see what we got coming in. So there's table 0 or 1, the next one, the next one. So, you'd have to understand the context of the datas of themselves, so what each report is doing. But at least this is pulling out the data into a CSV format. Okay, and this is the last one. So, this total line at the bottom here is changing total tonnage. So yeah, I'm not an expert on like what this data is conveying. I just know that these are individual tables and it's actually outputting them correctly, so it's working, right? All right, so that seems to work. So let's run it for all of the files. So let's take this breakout and we'll just run it for all of them and see what happens. Okay, so that finished and it took a while, like 5 minutes to run. Looking at the output, it kind of makes more sense of what these PDFs are representing. So this is actually kind of representing one big table. So it's actually kind of like a scrolling horizontal. Like so, aluminum cans is the first column here, but then wire cable is the second column here. So it's like we're going across one big table, and each page was a section of that big horizontal table. Um, so this did a number of years, and each year is sometimes looks a little different. Like the early ones are not the same format as the later ones, but that translates pretty cleanly to the CSV files. Um, But for some, I think for any of these, it's going to be a little bit of QA checking, some of like quality checking. So like for 2011s, it worked pretty well, but you lost the headers, right? So you don't know that 91, what is that? So you would probably want to go in here and update these with headers based on the PDFs. 2012, same problem. Then you get to 13, and it's like kind of collapsing everything together for the header. So you'd have to go in and add headers for that one as well, but at least you kind of have a hint of which one is which. And then for, let's see, for 14, same problem. Let's see, 15. 15 is an additional problem, right? So it might be hard to see, but the atoms row, the very first column, kind of collapsed the header and the value of the atoms county into one cell. So the header and the value take up one cell. So you'd have to go through and fix that manually. So these are just kind of some of the issues, data quality problems that you get across from doing this process, but it's infinitely easier than trying to transcribe or copy and paste each row or something awful like that, right? So fixing a few headers on a number of files is a lot easier than trying to get all this data out into a separate spreadsheet. So the next step, would be using the CSV module to load these files up and do it once they're fixed, and you could keep track of which file you're working on by the names of the years, right? So each one of them, you could open up each one of them, and after you fix the header, you can read in, the atoms column or the atoms row, and then get all of the different headers for the different pages, so the different columns, so the different types of materials in this case, and kind of do something with that. So that's kind of the next step you would do. I'm not sure exactly what we'd want to do with this data yet, so we're not going to do that. But at least this kind of shows you how to get started with this tool, and it's really, to summarize the kind of experience, it was like trying to get this configured correctly, this Camelot tool configured correctly, and there's a bit of work to do that and some dependencies you need to install and have on your system, and then kind of just evaluating what it's doing and try to kind of direct it towards to do what you want it to do. And in this case, we just decided the easiest way of doing it would just be to split the PDF into individual pages. And so it processes one page at a time. There actually could be a different way of doing this if you spend more time in the configuration map part of Camelot. You might be able to find some other ways of doing this, more advanced usage. But I think the way we approached it works, so I would just kind of stop there and just worry about the data and cleaning that up to improve it. But I think that's going to end it for this video. So thanks for watching and take care. Bye.